Our universe is incredible, surrounded by mystery and beauty, and many of us have questions about our past, present, and future. October Hallam is an intuitive medium with over 20 years of experience. She has assisted people with discovering their path by understanding their past and connected the living to their loved ones who have made the transition. She is currently offering readings through Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, phone, and in person. You can reach her at theancientgift222@gmail.com. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Hosting with me is Ryder Lee. What's up, Ryder? How you doing?
What's up, Chris? Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm ready to get into this discussion and get really weird with some Bigfoot stuff.
Oh, yeah, man. Tonight, our guests are Timothy Renner and Chad Renning. Before we bring them on, a couple of announcements. Coming March 11th, 12th, and 13th, we got Forbidden Knowledge News Con. We're going to be featuring 8 presenters. It's going to be online with a Rokfin premium membership, and that means you can get the entire conference for only $10. Just sign up through that link in the description, and you're going to get access to not only the conference, but all our premium content and all the content from every creator there on Rokfin. New episodes, always free on Rokfin, as well as Odysee and all podcast platforms. Our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, where we feature other podcasts from our wonderful community, like Raised by Giants, hosted by Mr. Ryder Lee. And follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All those links are in the description for you. And what does Big Pharma fear most, guys? It's you being healthy and not part of the perpetual cycle of being poisoned by Big Pharma and our medical industry. Break yourself free and check out what may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man. C60 Purple Power is amazing. The benefits have been personally outstanding. But please do your own research. Click the link in the description. Check out their website, and if you order from that link, you can get 10% off plus free shipping. Today I want to welcome back to the show Timothy Renner, and I want to welcome Chad Renning. Timothy is an author, illustrator, host of Strange Familiars podcast, paranormal investigator, and folk musician living in Pennsylvania. His illustrations have appeared in the pages of various books, magazines, and comics, as well as on many records and CD covers. Chad is an occasional co-host on Strange Familiars. He is a woodsman, paranormal researcher, and owner of Ruck Rabbit Outdoors. Gentlemen, welcome. How are you both doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Awesome. Yeah. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you guys. I've been looking forward to this. The topic of cryptids and mainly Bigfoot is fast becoming a fascinating topic for me. And for the longest time, I didn't really do shows about Bigfoot. But for the past couple of years, I've had more and more guests like yourself that research the phenomenon. And I have to say, this is one that's really got me scratching my head with some of these encounters and cases. And they seem to have many paranormal connections and aspects to them. So I really enjoy looking into this stuff. And like I said, I'm looking forward to this. And Timothy, you were on, I think, over a year ago. So it's been a long time. And this is Chad's first time on. So for the audience, I'd like it if each of you could talk a little bit about how you got into this research.
Sure. Well, for me, it was, I was born during what I call the golden age of Bigfoot. It was In Search of, and the 1970s, Bigfoot surge, is pop culture Bigfoot stuff, and loved it from the first time I heard about it, whatever it was. And as I grew older, I got into punk rock and girls and forgot about it a little bit. And then in my late 20s, looking on the internet again, I typed in Bigfoot one day and found this very, very active community still, and started getting more interested, and eventually wrote my first book and got more interested, and started the podcast and got more interested. And now some may call me obsessed.
Sweet. And what about you, Chad?
It's Tim's fault. No, actually, I grew up in York County. I'm also from Pennsylvania. And I've had some weird things happen to me as I grew up, but Bigfoot wasn't really on my radar. And probably about 6 years ago or so, I might be wrong on that, but it's around that time, I had an encounter as I was hiking with a friend out in the woods. And then I heard about this whole podcast world and actually contacted Tim, and we kind of met. I showed him where it happened and gave him my story, and we kept bumping into one another, and just kind of started hanging out and doing stuff together, and now here I am. So I guess it was meant to be. So
that's great. Well,
what do you guys sorry, Chris, what do you guys think that Bigfoot actually is, though? Do you think that it's a primitive ape, a primitive species of humanoids that's been here for a really long time, or do you think it might be like a government or a military operation genetically engineered these beings on that kind of level? What do you guys think's going on?
Mainly, I'm going to remain agnostic and tell you I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, it doesn't act like any natural known animal that's on the planet Earth. And if it is gifted with more evolutionary benefits than anything else, to the point where it might as well be paranormal if it has that many evolutionary gifts. So whatever it is, it's not like anything else that's here. On any given day, I might tell you one theory or another. I kind of lean towards them being, spirits of place, earth spirits of some sort. But, ask me tomorrow and I might have a different theory, but probably you'll never hear me say it's an undiscovered ape, because I just don't think that's a possibility anymore.
What are some of the traits of this Bigfoot phenomenon that makes it most likely something that, could be paranormal? Definitely something we can't explain at this time, but what are some of the most the crazy things that really make you scratch your noodle and say, this is different?
Well, the amount of times it appears with UFOs, either at the exact same time or in roughly the same time period, within a day or two, in the same place. The fact that people have seen them disappear, people have seen them, on one side of the road and just disappear and appear on the other side of the road. People have seen half a Bigfoot walking, like just the legs or just the torso. People have seen them carrying orbs. A lot of bizarre behavior with that kind of stuff. People have shot them, and things like where the bullet wound should be would be just a hole with a glowing blue light coming out of it, or they don't react at all to being shot. Not every time, but often people report this, and it just goes on and on. They seem to be as much like ghosts as they are gorillas.
Has there ever been a case of Bigfoot attacking people?
Sure, yeah. People have claimed it. There's been people I've talked to who have had their life pretty much changed. A guy in my first book claimed to have been attacked by a big hairy monster, as he called it. He didn't think it was Bigfoot because this was a local guy to me in Pennsylvania, and it happened in the 70s. And in the 70s, the general thought was that Bigfoot lived in California and Washington. He wasn't on the East Coast, so whatever he got attacked by, he just called a big hairy monster. But it put him in the hospital for a week. he was pretty beat up by it. I collected another story of a guy in Maryland literally ran into one in the woods that said it broke his arm and threw him to the ground. So, and that's just two that I know. There's been a lot of people that have claimed, if you listen to like podcasts like Sasquatch Chronicles and stuff, he's had quite a few people who have claimed to have been attacked by him.
Chad, what do you think? Any theories on what this entity or being could be?
Well, I'm going to also go with what Tim said, in that I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to claim to know what it is. As someone, though, who frequents the wilder places, I spend a lot of time in the woods, and I see a lot of things in the natural world. The one thing that I can't wrap around my head around is you got something that is 8 foot tall or taller and has a brain and mental capacity that is beyond ours. If you look at the natural world, one reason that human beings don't have gigantic bodies or real strong bodies compared to other animals is that our caloric intake is put towards our brains. If you were to take one of our relatives, a gorilla, which has, much more strength than us, or even a chimpanzee, which is up to 10 times stronger than us, they don't put the same caloric intake into their brains. For something that size, 8 foot or taller, to be able, let's just go back to the gorilla example. If a gorilla were to have the same brain size as us and still had that massive body, it would probably need 2 extra hours in the day to be able to forage enough food to keep that body going, plus that brain. So it's almost hard for me, from what I've seen in the woods and just through what what knowledge that I have of biology and stuff, to make that work in my head. And honestly, and I know people say, oh, it hunts, it eats deer and all this stuff. There's not enough calories in the woods of North America to keep something with an 8 foot body and a human brain running. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Certainly not in Pennsylvania where we are.
No.
And that's one of the first things Chad said to me when we started going out, and he was, of course he'd heard of Bigfoot before, but he hadn't gotten into the weeds too much. He was just, like he said, he was just a woodsman who had this encounter with something. And, so we were talking about it. And one of the first things he said to me before he learned, all the Bigfoot research, all the regular tropes of it, was, I don't understand what they're eating out here. He's like, there's, especially in the winter, like, what are they eating? And we're not finding the remnants of fires, so one of the reasons that humans don't have to eat all day long is we process our food. You get the most out of the calories when you cook and process your food. Now, I know there are raw vegans out there, and people say, well, some people don't, but for the most part, humans process their food. And that's why we are able to eat, 3 relatively small meals a day and keep going, maybe a snack here and there. If we did not process our food, we would have to eat a lot more and a lot more consistently to power, like Chad said, to power our bodies and power our brains. So the fact that we're not finding campfires, abandoned campfires throughout the woods where Bigfoot's been, cooking its deer meat to get the most out of the calories, again, suggests that, something else is going on here.
That's really some kind of like interdimensional aspects, I would be guessing, because if it was a 100% physical phenomenon, then it would have to eat like that. But if it's more of a spiritual phenomenon, like a paranormal or like a spirit, or if it's like half in this density and half not in this density, then I guess that would lay claim to that it's not 100% a physical entity. I don't know.
That's a possibility. What I always say is consider, do not conclude. So I consider the interdimensional hypothesis as one possible option. Without evidence, I do not conclude. So anybody who tells you they know what it is, they need to bring that proof, or they're just speculating like everybody else. So if you conclude, I always say, once you conclude, Bigfoot's going to make a fool out of you. The mystery tends to change and will reveal itself to be something else. But yeah, that's a possibility. That's one possibility. Interdimensionality is a possibility.
and that's something, that everybody has a theory. And, if you good science is, everybody has theories, but until you have the proof to prove it, it's not a law. So everybody has a theory, but nobody seems to have the proof. Or if they do have the proof, it conveniently disappears, as in, like Tim said, that, Bigfoot makes a fool out of you.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the best physical evidence that we've had over the years to even justify an existence for this being.
Yeah. So the best evidence we have thus far is footprints. And there are some fantastic evidence as far as footprints go. And if you take someone like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who is an expert in primate locomotion and primate anatomy and so forth, he's the guy who's on a lot of these Bigfoot documentaries. He will tell you all about the mid-tarsal breaks in these prints and dermal ridges, and how no one who wasn't an expert on the level of him basically could fake this stuff. Like, he can't see them being faked. And that's all brilliant. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. But when you consider what they are, I like to compare it to first-class relics in the Catholic Church as regards to saints, so people can wrap their head around it. So a first-class relic is like a piece of the saint. So it's like the saint's fingernail, a bone from the saint, something like that. Second-class relic would be something a saint touched. So essentially what we have, our best evidence, is these second-class relics, these just something that the animal touched, the mud that we're casting. First-class relics in terms of Bigfoot, hair, blood, scat, and the like, they're very problematic. The problem with them is all the experts in the world have looked at these things, and you'll get people 50-50 on both sides of the argument. Sometimes not even 50-50, but you'll get people on both sides of the argument saying, oh, it's real, it's something anomalous, and then other people saying, no, there's nothing anomalous about that. It's just, it's an unknown whatever, but it's nothing, groundbreaking. A lot of these hair samples will come back unknown primate at first, and then they're retested and they come up as dog or wolf or bear or something. And more than that, stranger than that, I should say, is an incredible number of this evidence goes missing. It just disappears. This firsthand evidence from bones. There was a very interesting skull found in California in the 1960s. And a doctor found it, and he sent it to UCLA to document it. Really, really interesting, bigger than a human skull. And some years later, they went back to track it, and they couldn't find it at UCLA. And they contacted the guys who they sent it to. They both moved on to different colleges. They were, professors at different colleges, and neither one of them seemed to remember it. It's not in the records anywhere at UCLA. It's just gone. And this is reflected all the way back to, if you look in the old newspaper articles, there's often finds of giant skeletons. And the thing that happens in those articles every time is the Smithsonian or some institution comes in and takes the bones away, but the bones are gone. And people say, well, the Smithsonian has them hidden in a special archive. Doesn't matter. They're still gone. We can't look at them. So by whatever process these things disappear, I say it doesn't matter. If we can't look at them and we can't study them, they're gone. And this happens with Bigfoot evidence a lot. A huge percentage of this stuff goes missing.
I've heard a couple of other researchers in the Bigfoot space talk about kind of like these Bigfoot men in black, but they're not really men in black. They're just like different types of officials. Maybe they say there's some kind of wildlife officials or something else, but they're always there for these Bigfoot encounters. Have you come across anything like that?
Yeah, I've written a good bit about them. They tend to show up when someone has collected physical evidence or has had a particularly intense encounter. And the interesting thing about them is it tends to be two guys. It's kind of a good cop, bad cop thing. They say one guy is a really big biker looking guy. And the other guy is a slim guy, more dressed, more businesslike. And he's the good cop and the big biker guy's the bad cop. And they tend to threaten people and tell them, you didn't see Bigfoot, you saw a bear, and you better shut up about it, et cetera, et cetera. They confiscate evidence sometimes. But the weird thing is, it's the same two guys that are showing up all over the country for years and years, going back to the 1970s. So they are very much the Bigfoot equivalent of Men in Black. They're very, very weird. And, sometimes they'll say they're from the Department of the Interior or another, government organization, but, no one can ever seem to track them down.
Wow, that's interesting.
Why do you think that they would do that, though? Right? Like, what is the importance of hiding Bigfoot? Why? I don't understand why that would be such a big deal. I mean, is there that many sightings of like Bigfoot? Are people seeing Bigfoot like they're seeing like UFOs and like aliens?
I think it's a lot more than people thought in general. I mean, again, if here's Sasquatch Chronicles, they have something like, I don't know, they're going on 800 episodes or something like that. They have a different witness every week, at least one. Sometimes it's multiple witnesses every week who have seen these things. I tend to believe them. I don't doubt people. On my own podcast, I have witnesses on not just Bigfoot, but general paranormal witnesses. And I tend to believe people. I don't see people really having too much reason to lie. People have said, "Oh, it's to get rich." There's no way a Bigfoot witness is getting rich. No one's paying them. And then other people have said it's for attention. Well, it's not really the attention you want that you get from this stuff. It's a lot of people, for instance, in my podcast, a lot of people change their name because they don't want the attention. They just want to tell their story. So they'll change their name and so forth. So that kind of goes out the window. Maybe a very small percentage of people are hoaxing or want the attention or something. But for the most part, I think people have genuinely seen something weird and they want to tell people. They want to, share their experience. So for Sasquatch Chronicles to have, witnesses on, like I said, every week, he does 2 shows a week. So, it's usually at least 2 witnesses a week. Often it's more for, years and years and years. And those are the people that have come forward. How many people haven't come forward? So, yeah, I think a lot more people see these things than we ever thought. Why? Whatever it is, I don't actually think these guys are from the government, by the way. I think it's part of the haze of the phenomenon, in the same way that Men in Black, I don't think are really from the government. It's something weird about the phenomenon. It's part of this is a theory. I don't know, but my theory in general is that it's part of the sort of liminal nature of the phenomenon. They're just trying to keep it. For whatever reason, the phenomenon itself just wants to be on the fringes. It wants to be weird. It never wants to be proven.
Yes, and that goes along with the strange connections that it has to like ufology and the paranormal, and you look at places like Skinwalker Ranch and Uintah Basin and all this stuff that has the high concentration of high strangeness, and they'll have Bigfoots popping up in there as well. So this is very, very fascinating. All of this. Have you personally had any sightings or encounters, or Chad?
Well, Chad could tell his.
Oh, okay. Which one?
Hey, let's hear it. If you got more than one, let's hear it.
Well, I've never had an actual sighting. Okay. The first time I encountered whatever it was, the other, as we like to call it, was when I was hiking on a trail with a friend. And basically, we were going up to this trail. It was a 1.5 mile trail out and back. Basically, the trail goes up the mountain, crosses across the ridge, goes to the old halfway point on the Appalachian Trail, and then you can either turn around and come back, or you can go down the AT to various parts. This trail goes up a mountain that is the end of a mountain chain called South Mountains that comes up from Maryland all the way up and arcs around through to the northernmost part of York County. And it's not super rough till you get to the top, where it's mostly, the ridge is what you think about. If you think about like a Stegosaurus back, it has like rocks that stick out along the ridge like that. And they're usually probably like 8 to 12 feet tall or taller. There's some that are even taller. Started out as pretty much a normal day. It was a Friday, so I was off work. He was off work. And I worked with him, and he said, yeah, I'd like to, go hiking. This guy was an outdoorsman, more of a hunter, not as much of a camper or a survivalist like I am. And he's like, yeah, I'd like to do some hiking, so I'd like to get further into the woods. And I said, well, let's do this trail. I go to this trail all the time. So I know this trail real well. I go there all the time and use it to test new gear. We started out in the morning, and there was a thunderstorm the day before. So we started up the trail, and we got to a spot where it starts to switch back up the mountain to the ridge. And I started seeing smoke coming down the mountain. I'm like, well, that's really weird. And it turned out there was a tree on fire. So basically what had happened is lightning had struck the tree. The flames had smoldered to the top of the tree. And where the wind was, it was smoldering, and it was dropping ashes down into the undergrowth. So I said to him, I said, well, we need to get a hold of somebody, because there's houses off the federal land, and if this starts a forest fire, we're gonna have a problem. So I said, do you mind me staying here? I tried to call the fire company, and there was no signal. So I said to him, do you mind staying here and just keeping an eye on this, just putting out whatever ashes or whatever fall down? And he said, no, I don't mind. So I started down, and I probably got a quarter of the way down, and all of a sudden he comes running down towards me. And I said, man, what's up? And, this is a real big guy. He was a Marine, not really afraid of much of anything. And he goes, I just saw something. I said, well, what did you see? He goes, I was standing there just kind of, looking through the woods. And he said, I saw this thing come up the mountain. And it was probably maybe 20 yards, if even that, from him. And he said it was walking on all fours. And I couldn't see a head. I just saw like this body, and it kind of had a hump, where the head or the neck would be. And he said, I said, well, what color was it? He said it was like almost like a honey brown color. And right away I'm thinking, he just saw a deer. He goes, no, I wasn't a deer. And he goes, it just walked up the mountain. He goes, and I yelled at it, and it didn't change pace. It didn't go faster. It didn't go slower. It just walked up. It didn't care about me at all. So right away I'm thinking, well, maybe he saw a bear, because there is a phase of the black bear that they call cinnamon bear that's kind of a lighter honey color. And I said to him, did you see a bear? And he goes, no, it wasn't a bear. He goes, I've seen bear in the woods. I've shot a bear. I know what they look like. It wasn't a bear. He goes, I don't know what this thing was. And this dude was scared. So to make a long story short, he went down with me. We made the phone call. We walked back up to the tree, and I started asking him questions while we're waiting for the firefighters to show up. And I'm like, well, how far was it? And at this point, I'm still thinking he saw a bear. And he's like, oh no. He goes, that's not what I saw. And he was really visibly shooken up. I said, all right. So then the fire company came up, and then I said, you guys got this? And they're like, yeah. So I said to him, do you want to go back to the car, or do you want to keep hiking? He's like, nah, let's go. He said, let's just go. So we started up. We got along the ridge. We were working our way towards the halfway mark of the AT, which is the end of this trail. And we had two other hikers coming from the opposite direction. They had come up the AT from a small town called Boiling Springs, and they passed us. And we went to the end of the trail. And as we were getting towards the end of the trail, that halfway point marker is somewhat on a hill. So if you think of as a T, we were on the vertical part of the T, and the other mountain side was like the top of the T. And as we were entering that towards that center point, which is a little higher than us, we heard this god awful cry. And I have never heard anything like it. And it just literally shook the woods. And it was almost like a combination of a howl and a growl. And it had the intensity of like if you were standing by like a steam whistle. It rose and dropped. And it wasn't a steam whistle. We're probably at least, 3 miles from the nearest road. You can hear sounds that come up from the valley, but I've heard stuff come up from the valley. I've heard trains as they go by up there. It was impossibly loud. It just felt like it shook the woods. So right away we froze. And my friend's like, oh man, we got to get out of here. And he went to run. I said, just hold on. And I stopped for a second. And I'm like, yeah, no way. And I said, right away, I'm like, I got to find out what this is, because I'm always curious about this stuff. So I went to take one more step, and then this time it came from a different place, closer on higher up on the hill, but closer to us. And this time I had the impression like if I kept going, something was going to hurt me. So I said to him, turn around, let's get off this mountain as quickly as we can, but safely. So we started heading back along the ridge. The next thing you know, we hear voices, and there were the two guys who had passed us were having lunch on one of the high rocks. They were like on a rock that was probably about 10 feet tall. So they were like 5 feet above our heads. And my friend passed them at a good clip. And I said to him, one of them said, oh yeah, did you guys hear that? And I said, oh my God, yeah. And I said to him, I don't, and one guy goes, was that you guys? I said, no, that wasn't me. I said, I don't know who made that noise or what it was. I have no idea, but I'm not going to stand around to find out. And the one guy the other one of those two guys up there having lunch made a joke. Well, he was like, it was probably Bigfoot. And I said, well, you guys can stay here if you want. I said, but we're getting out of here. So as I'm going down, they made the decision to come with us. And so they're like, well, maybe we should go too. So they got off the rock and they went down to us, even though they were parked on the other, further in the opposite direction. So as we're going down, we get to the vehicle, and I told them, I said, look, I'll drive you back to your car. And as we're driving back to their car, after we got off the mountain, I said to them, I said, what made you guys decide to go with us? He goes, the look on your face, you were dead serious that you didn't know what this was and you weren't going to stay around. He goes, we decided it was time that we should go too. So I took them back to their car. I took my friend home, and needless to say, he never hiked with me again. And I went home, and I'm like trying to figure out what this is. And I listened to every animal sound that I could think of: foxes, coyotes, wolves, anything I could think of, bears, a whole lot. And I could not find what this was. I even went to animals that weren't from PA. And I said, well, I wonder. And I went to a Bigfoot sound. And I think it was one of the Ohio calls on a YouTube video I heard. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what I heard. And then I did some research. I'm like, well, I didn't know Bigfoot was in Pennsylvania. So I just did some research. And here I found there was a site. I can't remember the name of the site, but they had it broke down by county on some of the accounts that they have gotten. And it was like 2 or 3 years before I had gone to that mountain. There were some kids that were camping there, and they actually had an encounter with something throwing rocks. And there was a scream on the mountain above them. And then whatever was throwing rocks into their campsite answered that scream. So, yeah,
we were on the same mountain at midnight on winter solstice a couple years back.
Yeah.
Chad said the same thing to me. You kind of got chills when you said that. Move as quickly and carefully as you can and get off this mountain. Chad said, after we saw some red eye shine up there and some other weird lights. And later, he tells me that whatever it was kind of pursuing us as we were making our way across the ridge. So,
oh, shit. Is
seeing red eyes a common occurrence with Bigfoot sightings?
Well, I mean, glowing eyes tend to be a thing. There's eye shine and there's eye glow. Eye shine, you've all seen, everyone's seen it if they've seen an animal at night and your car lights reflect off the eyes.
My cat scares the shit out of me sometimes with that.
Yeah. That's eye shine. And what they do, they have is a reflective layer on their eyes called a tapetum lucidum. And that gathers as much light as possible and allows them to see better in the dark. And a lot of mammals have it. The interesting thing is no upper order primates have it. So none of the great apes have it. There's a lower order monkeys can have tapetum lucidum, but no great apes have it. So again, if Bigfoot, exists as a natural animal, it would have to be an upper order primate, have to be an ape of some sort, like we are. Humans are apes. So if Bigfoot exists, it would again be unique among the upper order primates if it has a tapetum lucidum. The problem with that is people often report that the eyes glow without reflection, that they are self-illuminating, and no animal on Earth, to my knowledge, has self-illuminating eyes, mammal or otherwise. If you think about the way the eye works, to have light in your eye would kind of defeat the purpose of night vision. Would kind of make it more difficult to see, I guess. But people report these things with glowing eyes. The interesting thing about glowing eyes, though, if you go back in time, you don't find a lot of animals with glowing eyes, none. But what you do find is folkloric entities with glowing eyes, all throughout folklore, all over the world. Vampires, werewolves, demons, elves, fairies, et cetera, et cetera. The reports of these things having glowing eyes are all over the place. So
when you said that, I immediately thought of the Mothman, the red glowing eyes from the Mothman. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So put another check in the column for something paranormal about these creatures. The thing about red eyes, though, and we have seen red eye shine a couple of different places now. There's not a lot of things in Pennsylvania that are big that have red eye shine. So when we say we're talking about something that's well off the ground and very big, fist size eye shine we're getting in the woods or eye glow. And there's, I think bears can have red eye shine and some canines can, but these are, again, too big to be coyotes or something. These, what we've seen has been well off the ground. So, what is it? It's not, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, we've seen red eye shine a couple of times now, once on the top of that same ridge Chad was talking about, and once in a very interesting place that we call Gazoo's Wood.
Now, you were talking about possible violent encounters earlier, and in Chad's story, the gentleman saw whatever it was on all fours, and I've heard of kind of like aggressive encounters where these, whatever they are, will get on all fours and kind of start crawling around aggressively and stomping around. Have you had any stories similar to that?
One of the things that people often say is like, well, Bigfoot walks on 2 feet, and if you saw something on 4 feet, it wasn't Bigfoot. But the number of stories of these things dropping down, like you said, onto all fours, often like when they want to make a show of aggressiveness or when they want to run quickly. It seems like they'll drop to all fours and they can really move. Then this is all according to witnesses. Again, I don't have any deep inside knowledge. I just listen to a lot of witness accounts. Yeah. So, according to witnesses, this happens a lot. So yeah, to me, if someone says it was on all fours, that doesn't discount it as being a Bigfoot. It's just one way they choose to move. And again, not many things drop from all fours to perfect upright walking either. That would be pretty unique. Chimpanzees, kind of do that thing, but they don't tend to walk upright with ease. They can, but Bigfoot, for whatever reason, seems to be able to walk upright like us and then drop down and run like a chimp or a baboon when it wants to. Very, very unique. Again,
is there any place like in the United States that Bigfoot are most frequently seen? Like, are they more frequently seen around military bases or like around water streams? I mean, obviously wooded areas, but is there any like identifying marks? You know what I mean? Like missing 411 with David Politis, like he has like a whole map of like all the missing people and where they've gone missing in all the different areas. Is there a thing like that for Bigfoot?
Well, there's a number of things, and there's no one place to go, but and most of my stuff is based on like data I've collected from witnesses in Pennsylvania. But, I think it applies. A big one is near running water, near creeks. One of the questions I'll ask witnesses, Bigfoot witnesses, is what's the closest creek or body of water, running water. And there's almost always one nearby. Now, that might be because we're in Pennsylvania, and anywhere in Pennsylvania, there's almost always a creek nearby. But it is one thing. Another thing is rural cemeteries. sometimes you'll get encounters around. Again, put a check in the ghost column. Abandoned places in general, it seems like they're interested in places where people once were but are no longer. And another big one, and this is, for me, this is as big as creeks or anything else. It's what I call buried treasure theory. So where people have been digging in the ground, i.e. mines or quarries or things like that, or where there are legends of buried treasure, either literal buried treasure, pirates buried gold here, or just the idea of like there being a legend of a lost silver mine or something like that. This seems to be a huge element to this. There's almost without fail, I'll say 85% of the cases, especially cases where there's multiple things happening. People are seeing Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, etc. There's, again, I'll say 85. It's probably higher than that. Where I'll ask, okay, where have people been digging in the ground around here? What's in the ground? And I always get this answer of, oh, there's a legend of buried gold, or there's a mine up the road, or abandoned mine here, or whatever. So that seems to be a big factor. What it means, I don't know. Again, throughout history, supernatural creatures, fairies, etc., have always lived underground, according to legend.
Man, now let's talk about some of the super weird encounters. Like you mentioned earlier, Bigfoot carrying an orb. I've heard Bigfoot walking through portals, associated with UFO sightings. And this will go for each of you. But what's maybe some of the strangest, weirdest stories you've heard about a Bigfoot encounter?
Oh my goodness. I mean, so I wrote 2 books on the weird side of Bigfoot, Where the Footprints End, Volume 1 and 2, with a co-author, Josh Cutchin. So it's hard for me to pick. I mean, we literally filled 2 huge, thick books with these encounters. I mean, like I said, they'll disappear at the drop of a hat. You'll shoot them and they won't react. Or the weirdest one was when the guy shot it and said there was where the bullet hole was, which is a blue glowing light coming out of it.
Wow.
The half Bigfoot thing is weird, but one of the weirdest associations I came up with when I was writing that book is the number of times these things appear with women in white spirits of some sort. So you'll have a legend of a ghost of a woman in white, and people have Bigfoot encounters in the same area. But this goes back again in folklore. There's I traced it all the way back to, the kind of the oldest account I could find was a legend of Perkta, which is a sort of some people call her a goddess, a Germanic goddess, but she doesn't really fill a goddess role. She's more like a weird fairy woman, like a Baba Yaga type entity from the Germanic regions. And she dressed in white. She appeared as either a very young or a very old woman, and she had 2 things that accompanied her, 2 groups that accompanied her. And one was I think it's called the Heimchen. And these were the souls of dead children, which she had led away into the woods and died. And they took the form of orbs. Now that's very interesting because orbs appear around Bigfoot all the time. People see orbs either with Bigfoot or in the area where Bigfoot sightings are. The other thing that accompanied her was something called the Perkten. And that was a group of hairy wildmen that followed her around. So here we have this woman in white and these hairy creatures that follow her around. Very interesting. But then I started finding these reports all over the world, all over Europe. I haven't found any from Eastern Asia yet, but I imagine it's just a matter of time. But South America, all over the place, both modern and ancient reports, from folklore of wild men, big hairy things in the woods, accompanied by these women, white female entities. There's modern reports. There was one on Sasquatch Chronicles got my attention. These guys were seeing these Bigfoot all around their neighborhood, and then they were seeing this weird woman walking around who they said had, her feet looked too big. They said it was almost like she was wearing clown shoes, which is very interesting because Perkta was supposed to have very large swan feet. So the fact that they noted that she had these big shoes, but she always wore white, and they said she's a hideous hag and had something to do with these Bigfoot creatures. Very interesting story. But that was probably the most surprising connection I made of weirdness. Not it doesn't have the same kind of pull as like seeing two Bigfoot legs and no body walking down the street. But to me, it was really surprising that these women and white entities are so closely associated with these wild men.
Right on. Anything stick out for you, Chad?
Just some of the accounts we've had, when we've talked to people, like the one research we did when we were doing on the bridge on the book we just released for the multimedia project for the 300th episode of our podcast. We had two witnesses that talked to, and the one individual was telling us, they're like, yeah, I saw this ghost and it was bigger than you guys. I only saw it from the waist up. And we're like, well, how big? They go, well, basically it was like the size of you two guys put together. And Tim's a pretty big individual. And I'm not super small, but I'm average size. And they're like, yeah, and it was also taller than you guys. So right away I'm thinking, so you saw a ghost, but yet what? And we're at Gettysburg here. And I'm like thinking, well, what soldier did anybody have that was that size back in the 1800s?
and arms that hung down to the knees too, he said.
Yes. That detail. And every time we've been in woods, Gazoo's Woods is one of the places we call. It's not very deep woods, has houses really close, and we had all the classic Class B Bigfoot phenomenon going on. Noises, things coming at us. We had rocks thrown at us. We could hear things walking through the woods literally beside us, and we could see nothing. And that is just bizarre. That is just bizarre when that's happening to you.
Yeah. Eye glow.
Yep.
Chad asked for something. He and got screamed at.
Yeah. And that was crazy. And I think we were also in another area which is a state forest here in PA. And I had something charge at me. Don't know what it was. And I heard something come crashing through the woods, but nothing ever showed up. And it wasn't like something came at me and stopped, because I had lights towards it. So it's just really bizarre. Just really bizarre. So, and then whenever we talk to anybody who has, that has multiple sightings on their property, they'll start talking about the Bigfoot stuff, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, by the way, my house is haunted, or I see lights in the woods, or I've seen something go across in the sky.
We're all of the above. Yeah,
we're all of the above. So we run into that too.
Does Bigfoot have the ability to procreate? Like, do they have genitals to be able to procreate? We were kind of talking about this before the show. Like, why isn't it that no one has ever seen? Well, you said that people have had accounts of seeing baby Bigfoots or Littlefoots or whatever, but do they have junk? Is there junk in the trunk on these Bigfoots or what?
I had a witness on Strange Familiars, my podcast, pretty recently, and when she was a 12-year-old girl, I think she said she was 12. She was running through the woods playing hide and seek with her brother, came to an area, just felt completely like, oh, this is not good, and started looking around and saw a Bigfoot, and she said he was definitely a male. And I had to be delicate about the questioning. I said, well, was he proportional? And she said, yes, it was proportional. So you can take from that what you will. There's been other people who there's I wish I could recall the name of the book. I find it very funny because of the way the woman, the author, described it. She supposedly grew up around this clan of Bigfoot and had very close interactions with them. And at some point in the book, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't a direct quote, but she says, people often ask me, about Bigfoot's genitalia, and she says, I don't know much about that. And then she goes on for like 3 pages to describe them in intimate detail, sizes and shapes and everything else. It's very funny, I thought, because she's like, I don't know that much about it, and then just woof, just all these details. But according to her, it was the size of a forearm, and they pee blue.
Jeez,
according to her.
Whoa!
What?
Blue urine.
Hell yeah, man! That's something you don't hear every day.
I think wow. I've heard other witnesses talk about them urinating, and they've never mentioned blue. That's the only person that ever mentioned that they have blue urine. But maybe maybe her clan of Bigfoot was a fan of like blue icy pops or something.
Now they also have a sort of language that's been reported, right? Like they can communicate, and it's like you can almost make out that they're trying to say something sometimes. Have you heard this personally, or have accounts of this?
We've heard snippets of what people call samurai chatter, and Ron Moorhead and Al Berry in the 1970s recorded a lot of this stuff. I think hours of this from a location in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, where they had repeat encounters with something, and they recorded what language experts have determined to be some sort of speech. Now, they cannot tell you what they're saying, but they can tell you that it has the elements of speech. This is beyond my pay grade, these guys, but I'm going to trust that they know what they're talking about. Interesting. Now, they saw Bigfoot and then they heard the language. They never saw Bigfoot speaking this language. So I would point to poltergeist encounters, where poltergeist encounters will start out with, stone throwing like Bigfoot, but also a very guttural, unknown language. Even at Skinwalker Ranch, which you brought up, the family was saying that they were hearing something that sounded like Russian spoken backwards. Now, if you imagine Russian spoken backwards to someone who doesn't speak Russian, and then you listen to those Sierra sounds, are we talking about the same thing? So, it's a language that somebody recorded in an area where they were having Bigfoot encounters. Is it Bigfoot language, or is it something else? I don't know, but yeah, we've heard, snippets of that. I wish we could hear hours of it. It would be amazing. But we have heard like very, snippets of guttural kind of vocalizations like that. We've recorded some grunts and growls and stuff, but we've never. Did we? Wait, I think somebody was listening to one of our on-site episodes, Chad, and pointed out that we did capture some of that. I'm drawing a blank now.
I think so. I think at Harry Springs we caught some gorilla type noises too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I say gorilla type, I'm not saying they are gorilla noises. We're saying like that kind of sound.
Yeah, that's just what we compare it to, because you get a lot of like low huffs, like like that, and barking like a gorilla. Gorillas do bark. If you look up gorilla barking on YouTube, you can hear. And
we've also caught tidbits of what sounds like language or speaking in a low tone, but from a distance.
Yeah.
So we've caught a lot of that.
That's the other thing. Whatever these things are, they seem to be able to mimic all kinds of sounds, including human voices, and learn to some extent. And again, this might not be the Bigfoot. This might be the phenomena that surrounds Bigfoot. But whatever it is, they seem to be able to learn, like, for instance, the names of people's dogs. A lot of instances where people will say, Bigfoot called my dog. Again, they didn't see Bigfoot calling their dog, but they saw Bigfoot, and then they heard something from the woods calling their dog, and they made the leap and said, assumed it was Bigfoot calling their dog.
Man, that is crazy. Last year, Ryder and I were at a UFO conference. We were hanging out with a couple of high strangeness investigators, one of them Trey Hudson, and he's investigating some high strangeness in a place called the Meadow, and it's similar like Skinwalker Ranch, where they have just concentrations of weird shit. And him and another young lady, Katie Gabrowski, I believe, she was at the Colorado ranch, and they both reported these white fuzzy Bigfoots. Very, very white, hairy things. Have you guys heard about these things?
Yeah.
We've heard and seen white things.
Really?
Yeah.
I've chased something white through the woods.
That's right. Yes, at Pandemonium, where we had a very intense night at Pandemonium, is a ghost town in Pennsylvania named Pandemonium. That's not a name we gave it. It had that name to begin with, which means home of all demons or place of all demons. We don't know why they decided to call a town that, but that's
cozy.
It's a ghost town.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said cozy sounding.
Yeah. We had a really intense night there where we were woken up at like 3:30 in the morning by really loud wood knocks about maybe 30 to 50 yards from our tents, and just a number of other things. But on a subsequent visit, Chad saw something white and chased it through the woods, came back. This part of the woods, you kind of enter through a rural cemetery of all things. And you have to go back to the cemetery to get to your vehicles. So he came back to the cemetery, and I saw this, either the same thing or another white thing peeking out from behind a tree at the backside of the cemetery. So yeah, and that's just two. We've seen like white flashes of things. There's another area we go to, we call it Site 7. It's just a private area, so we gave it a code name. But I saw something very big and light colored, if not white, cross the trail. I was with another guy there. We both saw that. And then another day I was hiking through there and I heard something in the brush. This was daylight. And I turned to look and I saw something that on first glance I thought was a guy wearing, like, I don't know if you remember those like light gray sweatsuits from the 1970s. It's just generic, sweatshirts and sweatpants. I thought it was a guy in those, but with the hood pulled up, very, very light gray. But it was a hot day. It was like 80 degrees. I'm like, what is this guy doing in a sweatsuit in the brush? It's like real thick brush. I saw him for a second, maybe turned and looked at him. He ducked into the brush and ran. And I don't know what that. I don't know if that was a dude or not. Like, I didn't see a face. I just saw the shape of a hood and something light colored. So. Whatever it was weird, and there shouldn't have been anyone there, especially not in the thick brush. It's private property. No one should be there and so forth. But I don't know. But the number of white Bigfoot reports that we get far outpaces the percentage of albinism in natural animals. So why are these things colored white? In Pennsylvania, it would make sense about a couple weeks a year when there's snow on the ground. Otherwise, that is a detriment to your evolutionary progress. You've a lot easier to see something white in the woods than something brown or black. So, if it's not albinism, if it is albinism, again, they far outpace the percentage of albinism in other animals. If it's not albinism, why are these things white in Pennsylvania and in southern parts of the country? People are seeing so many of these white things.
We've also found in researching, because we do a lot of heavy research as far as like history and all that on the areas that we go to, we get reports of white animals, common animals in these areas.
Yes, that's true too. Mm-hmm.
So we run into that a lot. So what is with white things in these places? I don't know. It's just part of the strangeness of it all.
Could it be Yeti? Could it be Yeti in Pennsylvania?
What is Yeti but a white Bigfoot?
The longer I look at this stuff, the more I begin to think that it's probable that there's just this whole existence of life that we can't see. It's just beyond the spectrum of our vision. They're there all the time. We just can't tune in and see them. Or they can tune out. I don't know. Or maybe they're going underground. There's this civilization and these beings under there. I don't know. To close out, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that there's just this hidden spectrum of life beyond our vision?
Something like that. One of the most difficult things I think for especially us, being people who live in Western culture, is to hold the idea of something that can be ephemeral or spiritual at times, but also have a physical aspect at times. And, I've often, when I talk about Bigfoot being a ghost, a lot of people say, well, ghosts don't leave footprints. Well, I beg to differ. One of the ways that they would look for ghosts in the past was to put down baby powder and collect ghost footprints. Ghosts do leave footprints, and they do leave physical evidence behind. I met a ghost researcher who told me he had ghost fingerprints rather on a mirror. So they are leaving physical evidence behind. They are not there, and then they are there at times. They have a physical presence sometimes, whether it's by will or by other factors, I don't know. So again, allow me to change. I don't know what they are. You're never going to nail me down. But at this point in time, I will say they seem to act like some kind of spirit, like an earth spirit, like what our ancestors would have called a earth spirit, a genus loci or something, a spirit of place.
Anything to add, Chad?
No, Tim pretty much well covered it. The only thing I will say is, through all my encounters and experiences, I don't think it's that we're ever going to really know what this stuff is. And when I say stuff, I mean all of it. We as Westerners, we like to put things in categories. And, going back to when Tim was talking to the gentleman that was a ghost hunter, he was saying, oh yeah, I get footprints and I get fingerprints on mirrors. And Tim's like, well, I'm doing the same thing that you were doing, except I'm doing it in the woods looking for Bigfoot. So as we've gone on this journey together, like most people, I thought maybe it was something like a physical creature. But as I'm experiencing more and going along on this journey, I don't think you can put a category on it. And I don't think you can put categories on all this stuff. We've been doing some research that even, changes on what I think ghosts are. So I think in the end, this stuff is all interconnected more than what we think.
Oh, yeah, I definitely have to agree on that one. Ryder, any other questions or comments before we close out?
I think that you're totally right that people like to put things into a category for sure. Like if you were to take, a bunch of ufologists to an area and they would say, oh, well, and they got some kind of activity, they would say it's aliens or UFOs. If you took a group of paranormal investigators to an area and they got some evidence, they would say that it's ghosts and spirits, And if you took Bigfoot investigators to an area and they got some kind of activity, they would say that it's Bigfoot. And I think that both you gentlemen are completely right in saying that it involves all of it and it's all like connected, and we just have to come together on it and really figure it out and talk to each other about it. So I applaud you guys for coming on the show today. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we close out, Tim, let everybody know about podcast, website, social media, all that good stuff, and Chad as well.
Yeah, so strangefamiliars.com is my podcast. That's where you can find the podcast. So you can find links to my books there and to everything we do. Chad mentioned before our episode 300 project. It's called The Witch Cloud, and it has to do with haunted bridges in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. That is available it's a multimedia project. It's a hardcover book and an audio book and a podcast and some music all combined. And you can find information on that at strangefamiliars.com as well. It's called The Witch Cloud.
Awesome. All right, Chad, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you want to find me, look for Ruck Rabbit Outdoors. We have a Instagram page. Also, I run a small YouTube channel also called Ruck Rabbit Outdoors. It documents all my adventures in the wilder places of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland, and beyond. Also, on the Ruck Rabbit Outdoors YouTube channel, you'll also actually see some of the sites and the spots that where we have done our investigations, such as Pandemonium and other places. Also, the Etsy site is on Ruck Rabbit Outdoors, and we have some really cool vintage and curated items and vintage-like items on there for those of you who enjoy the outdoors and the woodsman life. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Ryder, let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
YouTube at Raised by Giants, and also on any other podcast platforms, wherever you listen to podcasts on, you can find me on there. And thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank
Thank
you
you.
both. We're definitely going to have to do this again. There's so much more we could talk about. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again next week.